people of IBEW Local 48, providing vision for the future.
And by Kinko's, the Copy Center, offering a wide range of business services 24 hours a day.
Good evening, I'm Jim Lehrer in Washington.
And I'm Robert MacNeil in New York. After tonight's news summary, we focus on the Baghdad missile attack with UN Ambassador Madeleine Albright and a variety of other views. Then correspondent Spencer Michaels looks at testing for lead poisoning.
Part of helping the world live and communicate better is keeping it well informed. That's why funding for the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour is provided by AT&T. And by PepsiCo. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And viewers like you.
President Clinton said today the U.S. missile raid on Baghdad had crippled Iraq's intelligence capability. He ordered the Saturday attack to retaliate for an alleged Iraqi plot to assassinate former President Bush during his April visit to Kuwait. Iraqi officials said some of the U.S. missiles had missed their target, Iraq's intelligence headquarters, and landed in civilian areas, killing 8 people and injuring 12. They vowed revenge. Thousands of people in Baghdad marched in anti-American demonstrations yesterday. Iraq lodged a formal protest at the United Nations today, charging the U.S. with state terrorism and blackmail. At the start of a cabinet meeting this morning, reporters asked President Clinton what message he intended to send terrorists around the world.
The action I took, I thought, was clearly warranted by the facts, and I think other terrorists around the world need to know that the United States will do what we can to combat terrorism, as I said in my statement on Saturday evening. It is plainly what we ought to be doing.
We'll have more on the story right after this news summary. Robin?
The National Commission on AIDS issued its final report today, saying a lack of government leadership and national planning were the core problems in combating the disease in this country. The report said a cure was difficult to imagine, and a vaccine was at least 5 to 10 years away. The bipartisan commission was created 4 years ago to advise Congress and the President on a national policy. At a news conference today in Washington, the chairwoman called on President Clinton to help in the fight.
The President has the bully pulpit. All of us are on the road, and we know perfectly well we can't be heard. We can't shout loud enough. We need some help there. And just as if there were some other crisis that threatened 1.5 million lives of young, productive Americans, the President needs to say something about that, and say it often, and say it in different ways and in different contexts, and bring it into it's a sad part of the fabric of American life now, but it is a very real one. And to the extent that silence is allowed to continue, people then can continue to pretend that it isn't out there. It's always going to be out there.
A report released today by the National Academy of Sciences suggests children may be consuming unsafe amounts of pesticides in fruits and vegetables. The panel said the government should measure pesticide risk for children differently from the risk for adults. But the pediatrician who chaired the study group said the problem was not at a point where parents should be overly concerned.
We're not saying that parents should rush out and radically change their children's diets. We're not saying that some particular food or class of foods is dangerous and should immediately be destroyed or discarded by parents. Quite the contrary. We are very strongly in favor of feeding children fruits and vegetables. We're not talking about a food panic here. We're not talking about getting rid of foods. What we're saying is that basic changes are needed in the current regulatory system to ensure that the foods eaten by American infants and American children are safe.
Scientists on the panel said that washing and peeling produce can reduce pesticide risks.
The Supreme Court ruled today congressional redistricting to favor minorities could be violating the rights of white voters. The 5-4 decision revived a challenge to a 1992 North Carolina redistricting plan creating 2 black majority districts. About 24 other new districts were created nationwide after the 1990 census to give blacks or Hispanics an electoral majority. The redistricting plans were mandated under the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Justice Sandra Day O'Connor wrote the majority opinion. She said racial classifications pose particular dangers, and districts based on them deserve close scrutiny by the courts. Also today, the court ruled unanimously to limit the amount of money and property authorities can seize from convicted drug dealers. The ruling said such seizures cannot violate the constitutional ban on excessive fines.
There was more fighting in Bosnia today. Serbs and Croats appeared to have joined forces to capture Muslim territory. At the same time, leaders of the three warring groups were holding peace talks in Geneva. The Bosnian Serb leader said Serbs and Croats had reached agreement on a truce and an interim government to rule Bosnia once a peace settlement was worked out. We have a report narrated by Vera Frankel of Worldwide Television News.
The Bosnian leaders would only convey their position to the Bosnian Serbs and Croats through Lord Owen and Torvald Stoltenberg. After the meeting, they said there would be more talks. They're insisting that any division of Bosnia among Serbs, Croats and Muslims should keep it as one state. No chance, says Serb leader Karadzic, who met with Croat leaders and the two mediators. He emerged with an agreement with the Croats, leaving the Muslims isolated.
Well, I do think that we made big progress. The only part that remained to be agreed is map of three republics. And both Serbs and Croats are ready to have formed their own state republic within Bosnia and Herzegovina. Muslims should join us immediately.
In Bosnia, Croat soldiers look down on a Muslim position in Travnik. Nearby, their comrades are battling the Muslims, in some cases cooperating with the Serbs for the first time, a sure sign that the Serb-Croat political agreement could affect the battlefield.
New fighting broke out today in Somalia. A Pakistani peacekeeper was killed and 2 wounded when they came under fire from snipers. A U.S. helicopter assigned to cover the UN troops opened fire on a crowd of armed Somalis, killing 2. Clashes yesterday wounded 3 peacekeepers, including 2 Americans. That's our summary of the news. Now it's on to the Baghdad missile attack and the lead poison cleanup. We devote much of the rest of tonight's program to reaction in this country and the Middle East to the United States' weekend bombing of the headquarters of Iraqi intelligence. The attack from Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from 2 ships in the Red Sea and Persian Gulf was aimed at the intelligence complex in central Baghdad. The United States has acknowledged there were civilian casualties from several missiles which didn't hit their designated targets. President Clinton and top officials said the attack was in response to an alleged Iraqi plot to murder former President Bush when he was visiting Kuwait in April. We begin our coverage with a newsmaker interview with the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Madeleine Albright. She presented the U.S. case to the UN Security Council yesterday, and she joins us now. Ambassador Albright, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be with you.
After now 2 days to assess the reaction, is the negative reaction in the Arab world of no concern?
Robin, I'd like to really say how very impressed I was and overwhelmed by the support that the United States had within the Security Council at the United Nations yesterday. I think this is unique when a country, the United States, has taken action unilaterally to have that kind of support. And to me, it shows really how important it has been that we've spent so much time under President Clinton's leadership developing multilateral diplomacy on a series of issues that have come up at the UN, North Korea, Haiti, Somalia. And now, when we came with our case, which I outlined at some length yesterday, explaining why we thought that we were justified in taking this kind of unilateral action, the support was there because the UN is dedicated now, this international community, to taking care of these rogue states. So the international community that we think functions as a group gave the United States its fullest support.
Wasn't there from China, which is one of the permanent members of the Security Council?
They did not. They were quite supportive, frankly. I mean, I think that they were not overwhelmingly enthusiastic, but they were supportive.
They've issued statements calling on the United States and others to observe the peace and not to take provocative actions. And so
well, what they basically, we just had a discussion on a different issue in the Security Council, and they're always saying that they would like to have dialogue.
But what about the Middle East, the reaction in the Middle East, for instance, from a friend of the United States, Egypt, which has been very negative and in varying degrees right around the Middle East? Is that of no concern to the administration?
Well, we're obviously concerned when our friends worry about what we've done, but the truth is that we feel that we were totally justified in taking this action. After all, what I think I showed yesterday, and the proof here, Robin, is incredible in terms of the forensic evidence, the interviews that were done separately. This was a plot managed by the Iraqis to assassinate a former president of the United States. We saw that as an attack on the United States, and under international law, Article 51 specifically, a country is entitled to defend itself when there is an attack upon it. And I said this yesterday, it is my belief that any country that finds itself where its former head of state has been maybe a victim of an assassination plot has a right to have this kind of very measured reaction to it.
Do you think most of the Middle East reaction is pro forma?
I would imagine. I think everybody has their audience, and I think that obviously this will evolve, but we are very satisfied with the kind of reaction, international support and reaction that our very measured action received.
Come back to the evidence you presented yesterday. You didn't convince the New York Times editorial writer today who said what you presented wouldn't be sufficient to persuade a reasonable American citizen that there was a proved case there, that one had to rely on the judgments of officials like you and President Clinton to take that on faith.
You know, Robin, on the one hand, if you're attacked on the editorial page for not having taken all the evidence or having done it as legally, and on the other hand, attacked from the right wing by Bill Safire for lack of certain amount of firmness, there must be something.
I was coming to that. You mean because you're in the middle, you're right?
Well, I think that we were right on this. There's no question in my mind. I was given a full briefing, as obviously were the other top national security officials. It looks like a very firm case. We did not rush to judgment. I think some people wondered why it was taking so long to respond to something that happened in April. This was a very, very carefully constructed case in which the forensic evidence was really examined, and then time was taken to get independent corroboration from these witnesses, and so we feel that we have a very good case.
Is there more evidence than you presented yesterday in public?
Well, I think there is a lot of other intelligence material, but the truth is, and this is what I was so interested by yesterday in the Security Council, when I went through all that with my fellow members, they were very interested, they were persuaded. We had obviously also, by the way, had informal sessions before, because part of being in the Security Council is we meet in a variety of settings all the time, and the people did, in my mind, were convinced by what we had. I think there's very little question that this is a plot that is tied directly to Iraqi intelligence.
You brought up William Safire, the columnist in the New York Times. He said today this was a pinprick and that the administration's making a mistake if it thinks that this pitiful wrist slap, to quote him, will be taken as serious resolve to deal with Saddam. How do you react to that?
Well, I think the reaction is that they are taking it seriously. It is a sign that we are resolved to deal with issues unilaterally when they affect the vital national interest of the United States, when it looks as though the United States itself has been attacked through an attack on a former head of state. And we have also made very clear that if there is any retaliatory action, that there will be another response. So we consider this as very firm action, measured to what we saw as the event in the first place. And I think it shows that the United States government, with President Clinton in the lead, is resolved to take firm action.
Since the U.S. has been at pains to encourage the development of democracy and the rule of law in Kuwait, since the liberation of Kuwait, why not wait until the trial of the plotters there was complete and their court had delivered its judgment?
Well, we worked with them. We also decided that we had to have our independent evidence because this was an attack on the United States. And we felt that it was very important to pursue our line of questioning and the forensic evidence that we had, as well as to pursue these independent investigations. And we obviously took into consideration what it was coming out of the Kuwaiti system also.
You mean you couldn't rely on it?
No, we took some of theirs. We had some independent discussions with the suspects, and then we had our forensic evidence.
So in effect, the CIA and the FBI have have come to judgment, which the Kuwaiti court has yet to come to. Is that? I mean, they've made a judgment.
Well, they have made a judgment on the basis of the evidence that we had, which has to do with our response as far as Iraq is concerned. The Kuwaitis will come to some judgment as far as the specific suspects are concerned.
Was the action speeded up or done now because of the proximity of the exposed bombing plot here in New York City?
I don't believe there was any connection. As far as I know, these were totally separate investigations, and the investigation that had to do with the assassination attempt on President Bush was one that was carried out with its own timetable.
What messages was the president trying to send outside Iraq to?
Well, obviously this message was directed at Iraq, but as he said in his own statement, it is a message about terrorism and the lack of the fact that we will not allow it. And also, as he said, kind of the American statement of don't tread on me. I think that he really wanted to show that state-sponsored terrorism was unacceptable within the international community that we're trying to build. As I said earlier, Robin, one of the things about the way that we're operating in this new world is that we fully believe that the international community wants to and will take action against these rogue states, because the rogue states have no stake in the international system now, and they're standing on the outside of it, throwing hand grenades into it, and disrupting whatever international community we're trying to build. And what the president was saying was that when such a state takes illegal action, especially against us, that we have to take firm action. And the reason that we took it to the United Nations was that, according to the UN Charter, if you take your action unilaterally under Article 51, you go and tell the United Nations. But also because we wanted to explain it in a multilateral body, because that is the way we think we have to deal. And as the president so often has said, we will act multilaterally when we must, and multilaterally when we can, and unilaterally when we must, and this was a good example.
Many people who are experts in this area are drawing links between the World Trade Center bombing and the alleged bomb plot that was exposed last week here in New York to countries like Iran, possibly Sudan, which are known to foster or be sympathetic to terrorism. Does the message to them that Tehran or Tripoli, Libya, or Damascus, Syria, or Khartoum should expect cruise missiles?
Well, I think obviously each case is different, but the message is that state-sponsored terrorism is unacceptable, and that at each time the response might be different. But the most important message here is state-sponsored terrorism is unacceptable in the international community.
Mm-hmm. Is there another message in this? It's besides the alleged plot on President Bush, Saddam Hussein stands in continued defiance of many particulars of the post-Gulf War United Nations resolutions. Is this an indication to him that tougher enforcement measures are coming from the United States in that area?
Well, frankly, what was also part of my statement yesterday was we put it into context also of all the Security Council resolutions that Iraq is not abiding by. It is still repressing its people. It will not agree on the boundary. It is not allowing the sale of oil profits in order to feed the hungry. They are still not properly controlling their weapons of mass destruction. Yes, and I just left the Security Council where we, in effect, were yet again making sure that Iraq did abide by this boundary that was created. So all in all, what we're trying to do within the international community is try to bring Iraq into some kind of compliance. And there are a whole series of resolutions which they are not complying with, which we consider unacceptable.
So what's the U.S. going to do about that?
We are going to keep at it with our allies, because this kind of a thing is where the multilateral action is most important. And so we are maintaining the coalition, and there are sanctions against Iraq, and they will be maintained until they abide by the various resolutions.
Well, since the U.S. has the weapons there, witness the cruise missiles, is there more military action contemplated because it's been 2 years now that he's been in defiance of many of these resolutions, or a year and a half in the case of some?
Well, I think each act will have to be judged on its own, and as numbers of us have said, is that if there is some retaliation after this, they can expect a response. But each one of these issues is judged on the basis of what the appropriate measured response should be.
Just finally, to come back to the reaction in the Arab world for a moment, since everything seems to be connected. A former colleague of yours, Bill Quandt, who was in the Carter administration, said today that the U.S. has paid a price in the Islamic world for the weak policy on Bosnia. In other words, because it wouldn't go further to defend Muslims in Bosnia, it will not get the sympathy of the Arab world against Saddam this time.
Well, I'm not sure that's true, because we have been working very hard with the non-aligned. We have indicated that we will support their embargo, their lift the embargo resolution, because that has been consistently our policy. I think we are working very hard to establish good relations with the moderate Muslim states. I've spent a great deal of time on a one-on-one basis talking with my colleagues there. So I think that we're really developing, I think, a very positive relationship.
Ambassador Albright, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Jim?
Now, 5 other perspectives on the Saturday bombing. Brent Scowcroft was National Security Advisor to President Bush. He's now a consultant, and last week formed the Forum for International Policy. William Odom is a retired Army general, former head of the National Security Agency. He's now director of the Hudson Institute's National Security Program. Mohammed Haqi is an Egyptian journalist, served as spokesman for President Mubarak of Egypt. Laurie Milroy is an author, political analyst, now at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Also at that institute, Michael Eisenstadt. He's a specialist in Iraqi military affairs. General Scowcroft, beginning with you, just on the evidence, I assume that you have more than a passing acquaintance with what the evidence was, that there was, in fact, a plot against former President Bush. Is that right?
Yes, I know a little bit about the evidence.
Is it compelling?
It is to me. It is to me. I think that this was a high-tech effort in both the nature of the equipment and
the equipment
material.
that could be used in the assassination.
And the equipment itself bore clear indications of the way the Iraqi government does things.
Did it go beyond that? I mean, in other words, is there evidence of direct links between a person and the people who were actually to carry, a person in the Iraqi government and the people who were supposed to carry out the plot?
Well, there's the evidence of one of the chief people who was picked up, who said he was told that this was an attempt on the life, directed at the life of President Bush.
But the bottom line for you is there's no question in your mind that there was a connection.
None.
Is there any question in your mind about whether or not this was in fact generated from Baghdad? In other words, this was Baghdad's idea? I mean, this wasn't somebody who came to them with a, hey, I got a great idea, let's assassinate President Bush?
I'm comfortable in the thought that this was directed from Baghdad. Yes.
What do you think of the U.S. response then?
Well, I support the response. I don't think we ought to be under the assumption this is going to make any great difference to Saddam Hussein. One of the few things he does seem to pay attention to is the use of force, but this will not change his behavior for long, but I think especially for the Clinton administration, it was a useful thing to do, because the statement they made about a month ago that, well, perhaps we could normalize with Iraq while Saddam was still there, I think sent some waves of nervousness through the Arab world, and I think this helps there.
If it doesn't make any difference to Saddam Hussein, then to whom does it make a difference?
Well, as I say, the one thing he does understand is the use of force, and I think now he knows that what he didn't know before, and that is whether or not this administration would continue willingness to use force as the Bush administration has. Now he has an answer to that.
May not, in other words, the force may have been limited, but at least they have demonstrated the willingness to use some.
Exactly.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Haqi, you heard what the dialogue between Robin and Ambassador Albright about the Arab reaction, and the question was whether or not it was pro forma in being negative about this. How do you read the Arab reaction to this?
No, it was not pro forma. You will not find a single Arab leader or a single Arab individual who would shed any tears over the fate of Saddam Hussein. Nobody agrees about him, nobody likes him. If he goes, so much better. But if you are going to take the high moral ground, then you have to be consistent. And we do have public opinion. We do have the proverbial Arab street. Mrs. Albright was talking about one-on-one and good relations with everybody and so on, and I respect that. But when it comes to a raid like this, well, how about Bosnia? In the Arab world, you will hear them saying that you chose the tilting wall, you know, the weak side that nobody cares about, and or when you cannot beat on the horse, you beat the saddle. I mean,
Saddam Hussein has no friends. It's in other words, that's a free
for all. Yeah. And there is the suspicion that it may have been done for domestic reasons. This is why people like...
I mean domestic reasons here.
Here. This is why people like Amr Moussa and others...
Who's that?
The foreign minister of Egypt, are saying, you also have to be very careful and you have to show more, especially that the President Clinton himself was very tough when he was a candidate about the Bosnian situation. And now we're going back to a situation where actually we are equating the Serbs with the Muslims, which is unbelievable.
General Odom, how do you feel, what do you think the message is from what happened on Saturday? Whether it's to Saddam, draw it in any way you want to.
I think the message is largely a domestic one here. We may think the message went elsewhere in some significant way, but I agree with General Scowcroft that I don't think it's going to have much influence on Saddam. It seems to me that one has to put this in larger perspective. First thing it demonstrates to you is the Gulf War is not over. It's still on. We've had several skirmishes since then, and this is only the most recent. And when one looks at it that way, one asks, does this advance it for our general long-term objectives or not? It's hard for me to work that out because I'm not sure if the Clinton administration has a strategy for managing this conflict over a longer period or not. And it also makes one think about the fact that the U.S. is in 3 wars right now. We're in Somalia in a war, we're in Iraq in a war, and by implication, or rather by connections of our actions through the sanctions on arms to the Bosnians, we are de facto in that war. And what are our priorities among these wars? That was raised. What do we really want to achieve? I'm inclined to think this is just a squandering of resources.
What kind of resource? I mean,
military resources,
cruise missiles?
Cruise missils, and what you may lose in the public opinion in the sense of that we just heard here earlier.
Well, do you subscribe to Madeleine Albright's basic premise, which is the basic premise of President Clinton, is that this plot was in fact an attack on the United States of America?
You know, I think one can make that sufficiently compelling to convince the American public, and that's really all one needs to make that work politically. And international law follows politics and the consequences of war, not the other way around. So I think dwelling excessively on that is really to miss the point. The real issue is where we're going. Since 1979, the only way the U.S. could stabilize that part of the world is put U.S. force in there because our relationship with Iran broke off. As long as we had that relationship, we could play one party against another without much U.S. force. Since that time, we've needed U.S. force to maintain the stability. Unfortunately, with the Gulf War, we brought that to a closure that neither moved Saddam out nor left us with a significant force on the ground in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia to keep a stable situation there today.
General Scowcroft, do you agree with General Odom's basic point that the Gulf War is still on?
Well, I think it's still on, but I think we need to put Iraq in perspective. We have accomplished our fundamental objectives for which we undertook the massive action, that is to kick him out of Kuwait and to destroy his military ability to threaten his neighbors. He is an irritant. He is a problem. He is not a threat at the present time. And as long as we keep our guard up, as long as we keep the sanctions on, Saddam shouldn't overly concern us.
Ms. Milroy, what do you think of the U.S. response? Was it justified, and what message it sent?
It was justified. It was necessary. Doing nothing would have told not only Saddam, but every would-be terrorist, come strike us, come hit us, come beat us about, because we're not going to have any meaningful reaction. It was absolutely essential. One can say that perhaps more should have been done, and there was some indication in the press today that the White House, the NSC, and Colin Powell favored doing more, and if that was a possible thing to do, I think more should have been done. More targets.
Like what?
You could have hit more Iraqi intelligence targets. You could have hit the military intelligence. You could have hit special security. You could have hit the general on the lawn, the general security. They were all targets. Why
You think
not?
it was justified by this plot?
Yes, because they are all involved in terrorism, whether against foreigners or against the population of Iraq. I think it's also important to note that this strike was popular inside Iraq. Following the strike, the Iraqi government let the telephones out of Iraq operate normally without interrupting them, believing that people would be calling their friends abroad and complaining, but no. What they were saying was, why did they stop? Why only 23 missiles?
Who was saying that?
Iraqis saying it to their friends abroad.
Now, I mean, I'm not asking you how you know that, but I mean, obviously you've got some good sources that are listening in on phone calls.
No, no, I mean,
No?
Iraqis.
Iraqis just pick up the phone just like we would, call their relative in the States and say, hey, why did they just blow up one building and kill 8 people?
That's what was being said.
Yeah. Now, why would the Iraqis want more buildings blown up?
Because the intelligence apparatus, the regime, represses, kills people. That's a low-tated building. People have been tortured and murdered and killed in there.
Iraqi people.
Iraqi people, yes. So when that building is destroyed, it makes much of the population, Sunnis and Shias and Kurds, the whole population, gives them a sense of satisfaction that those guys got it.
Mr. Eisenstadt, William Safire with Robin discussed with Ambassador Albright on Meet the Press yesterday. He used another word. He said this was a pipsqueak response to a plot to assassinate a former president of the United States. Would you use a word like that?
Well, I basically in fundamental agreement with Mr. Safire. I think that basically this attack does not significantly restrict Iraq's ability to conduct terrorist operations if they desire to do so. As Laurie said, there's several other terrorist intelligence organizations which have been involved in the past in terrorist operations. It doesn't take a lot of people. It doesn't take a large infrastructure to carry out these kind of operations. The main point is not to destroy their ability to do it, because I don't think we can do that. It's to convince Saddam that anytime he tries to do something like this, the punishment will be so severe that it's not worth it to him. And therefore, I think by this very limited kind of response, this very proportionate response, it sends the wrong signal to him, because he's able to calibrate the outcome of his brinksmanship, and he realizes that by hitting an intelligence building in the middle of the night, he still has a large part of his intelligence infrastructure intact, and he's able to conduct these kind of operations again.
So you don't buy General Scowcroft's basic idea that while this was limited and it didn't do that much damage, at least it says to Saddam Hussein, okay, this is all we're going to do this time, but at least this new administration, we are demonstrating the new administration, we in the new administration are willing to use military force against you, buddy-bye. You don't think that's...
I think it's a good first step, but I think I would have liked it for the operation to be more extensive. The thing is, we have...
Let's have it a real military operation, not a signal operation.
Exactly. The point is we have limited regional and domestic freedom of action. As General Odom says, where our forces are spread out. Therefore, we have to make every blow count. And we can't afford to play tit for tat. We have to hit him with disproportionate and overwhelming force whenever he attempts to provoke us. And I think that's the best way to deter him.
Well, you don't buy that, do you, General?
Well, I think what we have to remember is that wiping out half of his army and really almost destroying him hasn't changed his perspective. So I think I would remind you of what General Odom said, and that is, if we're going to do something, I support what we've done because I think it was a gesture and I think it did send a signal. But if we're going to do anything serious, then it ought to be part of a strategy. All of our previous attacks have been part of the strategy, and that is you interfere with our forces and you're in trouble. In other words, they have had a purpose, and the purpose was to maintain and tighten the sanctions around him. But I don't think, first of all, we can't destroy his ability to conduct terrorist activity. And so if we're going to do more, we ought to have something specific in mind that we're trying to accomplish.
Do you agree, Ms. Milroy, that with General Scowcroft that as a practical matter, we can't destroy Saddam Hussein's ability to conduct terrorism?
I agree, but I think what I would disagree with General Scowcroft is that he is not a threat. And if I may commend to everyone an article out in the Wall Street Journal which suggests that Iraq may be behind the terrorism in New York.
Iraq might be behind?
That's right. There's, of all the suspicious characters, the most evidence supports the idea that Iraq was involved. You had two figures in the bombing. One was a key figure, the night of a key figure, and one was perhaps peripheral, but they were both Iraqis. In the months before the bombing, they came from Iraq to the United States, and then they went back to Iraq. They couldn't go back to Iraq if they worked for a country like Iran. You talk about the plot that was exposed that the FBI got. The principal target of that plot was the UN. Who wants to blow up the UN? Not Iran, not Sudan. They've got no quarrel with the UN at all. Iraq. And
yeah, okay.
If there's...
Keep going. No,
okay.
That's all right.
And on Saturday, before the strike, the newspaper that belongs to Saddam's son O'Day had a comment about the arrests. And in that comment, Babel newspaper said, the attempt reflects the anger of those who consider that the UN no longer represents humanity, and it warned that the UN will become the target of all freedom fighters. I would be looking at Iraqi involvement in those bombings.
That makes sense to you, Mr. Hakim?
The only thing that I really care about is, does Saddam get the message or not? I submit that he doesn't get the message. That the only way you can really hurt Saddam is to hurt Saddam. The feelings in the Arab world is that we care very much about the Iraqi people, but not Saddam. He doesn't care about the intelligence building. He doesn't care about the guards. If we destroy half his army, as long as he is there, he can regroup. And that's what he's doing right now. But if you send him the message like this little poster says, Uncle Sam wants you, we are going to be after you, that's the only language you understand.
Well, do you buy Ms. Milroy's point that there could definitely be a connection between Iraq and all the New York activity, the terrorist activity in New York?
Well, I don't know. I mean, all of this is circumstantial evidence. It may very well be. I don't know. I mean, he has a very good sort of motive, but do you have the facts? I don't know.
Well, one can sympathize with these two views. We haven't done enough, and that we have to do more to where he really gets the message. But carry that out and tell me exactly what the specific operation is that will achieve that. I don't see any operation short of occupying Iraq. Now, we could have done that. And it seems to me that the policy General Scowcroft was very much behind had that as a logic, which they stepped back from. We really should have taken all of Iraq. And by doing that...
Like Korea, I mean.
Absolutely. And you'd have to take the political responsibility for the restoration of that regime. And I think what we did was try to have it both ways. We tried to evade that responsibility and still have a war there and kick them out of Kuwait. We could have held a long-term defensive position in Saudi Arabia without doing that. Now we're in the position of having to fight that kind of containment policy and put up with this nuisance kind of activity without the forces in the position, and having already expended a lot of forces in a war without getting the results of the total destruction of the regime. So I think the very dilemma that the previous administration found itself confronted with has now been picked up unambiguously by the new administration, and they are on the horns of that same choice.
General Scowcroft?
I strongly disagree with that. I think what we did in Iraq was what we should have done in Iraq. Had we gone in and occupied Baghdad, we might still be in occupation of Baghdad, with the whole Arab world dead against us, with the whole idea of a coalition trying to improve the Middle East collapsed. I think it would have been the wrong thing to do.
I didn't say I ever did.
General Scowcroft was saying that what we care about, what he cared about, was sending the wrong messages. Mm-hmm. And if we say that we respect the law and we cannot assassinate foreign leaders, that's the wrong message for Saddam. If we say that...
what do you mean? Why is that the wrong message?
Because he feels that they're not going to get me. So
I see. I got you. Right. In other words, he ought to be running scared over there. Yeah. He ought to be looking over his shoulder all the time.
Absolutely.
I got you. Okay. And to tell him we're not going to kill him It's not the way to.
It's not the way.
Scary, right?
I think the question is, I think there's a reluctance in the U.S. military based on its experience in Panama for going after foreign leaders and setting for itself objectives which it may not be able to accomplish. The thing is, his security organizations, which ensure his rule, we do know where they're located, we know where the garrisons are, and by going after them, we can thereby go out indirectly, we could show Saddam that if he's going to challenge us, then therefore his rule will be at risk. And every time that he engages in a terrorist outrage or engages in brinkmanship, he stands at ending up in a worse domestic situation afterwards than he was before.
So you believe there are serious military things that we could do. You disagree with General Odom,
Yes,
that there's something
believe
short
there's
of going in there and occupying the country.
Yes, I believe there are options we haven't taken yet, that we haven't presented. Well, basically going after some of the units that were mentioned before, the security units which are vital to the
Go in there and bomb them, wipe them out.
Yeah, hit them so that their ability to assure the survival of the regime is in question. And I think that Saddam will realize that it's not worth the risk of taking on the U.S.
But what about General Scowcroft's point that the United States and the coalition already destroyed half of his army and have already done incredible damage, and that didn't do any good.
But these were among the units that were the least scathed. These were not units that were deployed to the battlefield during the war. These are units, many of which stayed in the Baghdad area and which are defend Baghdad against a coup from the army. So to a large extent, his intelligence apparatus and the regime, the Praetorian Guards, survived the army intact, survived the war intact.
General Odom?
I'd like to see you design the detailed plan that's going to do that. You probably irritate those units by bombing them. You're not going to put them out of the business. You may make them more loyal to Saddam. Furthermore, it's not clear to me that if Saddam goes, that things are going to change that radically in Iraq. That's a hypothesis that we could test, and we might discover it's not valid.
It hasn't been tested yet, though, has it?
No, it hasn't. But I wanted to go back to General Scowcroft and say that I'm not advocating that we take over Iraq. But I said the logic of the policy was to take over and run it for 20 years. And
in other words, when you put 500,000 troops in there, that's the policy, you mean?
It seemed to me that was the inexorable course on which they decided to proceed and then backed off. And you've got the disadvantages of both postures. Now, you're still trying to enforce the sanctions. It would be instructive to go back and look at what Senator Nunn said during the debates at the time right now. And I think some of those things may have been...
What did he say?
Well, that he thought that we could maintain a defensive position and try sanctions for quite a long time. And we would probably be, during that period, dealing with these gnat bites that we're getting like right now. And we would have a moral ground that we didn't have before, and we'd have a very large force there, or at least the potential to regenerate it.
Saddam would have a nuclear bomb, that we know now.
You can go prune it back.
You mean if we...
What we know now about Saddam's nuclear program is that in the period that has passed since the invasion of Kuwait, Saddam would have developed a nuclear bomb.
If we could deter the Soviet nuclear forces, I'm sure we could put nuclear forces out there to deter this one. Furthermore, I have no problems with periodic trimming back of that program. It's like Bermuda grass. You'll never get it all, but you can get some each year.
And keeping your analogy alive, are we going to continue to have these kinds of gnat things from Saddam Hussein, General Scowcroft?
Oh, I think we might, and I think sooner or later, the Army will get rid of him. But
the
Iraqi Army, yeah. And until then, we may have. But I say it's an irritant. He's not doing any real harm. I think we have to remember before we start talking about occupying countries for years. You know, Vietnam is not so far behind us that we have to remember. We have to keep the American people behind us, and I think they are strongly behind the use of force now. As we've seen, it didn't cause a ripple over the weekend. Yeah. But as soon as you have an army of occupation in a place with snipers picking off troops and so on.
They're going to pick me off here in a minute if we don't go. Thank you, Ms. Milroy. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The American Academy of Pediatrics recently recommended that all children be tested for lead poisoning. But some researchers and physicians strongly disagree. They say the nationwide concern over lead poisoning is exaggerated and harmful. Correspondent Spencer Michaels of public station KQED San Francisco has this report.
At Children's Hospital in Oakland, California, it has become routine to test young children for evidence of lead in their blood. That's because lead poisoning at high levels can produce stomach ailments, anemia, kidney problems, hearing loss, and a drop in IQ. Even at low levels, a decline in cognitive ability has been reported by some researchers. 2 years ago, the National Centers for Disease Control recommended that all children be tested for lead. And this spring, the American Academy of Pediatrics advised the same thing. Programs are springing up to actively look for lead and lead poisoning in neighborhoods like this one in a minority section of Oakland. Old paint, manufactured before lead was banned in 1977, peels off buildings so that toddlers can eat it when playing in the dirt. At this home, rented by the Allen family, 3-year-old Dante Allen, one of 7 children, has a lead level of 16 micrograms per deciliter of blood, when the safe level is now considered 10.
I took a blood test to him because he had a call, and Dr. Woods wanted me to take a blood test, so I went to the lab and took it. Then they sent me 2 weeks later a thing of his level being 16.
On lead?
On lead.
Dante, like all children with slightly elevated lead levels, shows no clinical symptoms of lead poisoning. Doctors rely on blood tests.
It had to come from out of here or either outside in the dirt, or it had to come from somewhere, so I wanted to get rested and tested and stuff, and they told me that I could, so I have to wait and get them tested.
You know, I was just wondering how did this all of a sudden come about?
Are you worried about yourself?
Yes.
Why?
Because right now at this point I'm pregnant and I'm scared that it might be something wrong with the baby.
Herman Morris of Alameda County's 1-year-old lead poisoning prevention project came to check out the Allen's house. The soil outside was contaminated. And what happened when you sent it to be tested?
Well, it came back at over 1,500 parts per million.
Is that high?
That's very high. That's high, yes.
It's almost hazardous waste.
It is considered hazardous waste by HUD. The action level with HUD is 1,000 parts per million.
Why do you think this ground out here has lead in it?
More than likely it came from the lead-based paint that's on the house. There is lead-based paint here. As you can see it right here, it's chipping. Right in this area. It also is bubbling up as well.
So what do? Tell the kids not to play here?
Well, we definitely tell them not to play here. This is one of the first things that I come out and I educate them on.
We are very concerned about the effect of lead on children in the United States.
Dr. Lynn Goldman is an epidemiologist, pediatrician, and chief of environmental disease control for California. She helped formulate the universal screening recommendations.
So many children in the United States still have lead poisoning, and that they are suffering irreversible impacts on their IQ and behavior from this exposure. Second, there is no way that has been identified to date to screen only the children who are at highest risk. We don't have a way of predicting which children, ahead of time, which children are not going to be exposed to lead. And thus, we really felt that all children should be screened.
Dr. Goldman's opinion is not shared by all.
Now listen, first I'm going to listen to your chest, okay?
Dr. Edgar Schoen, a pediatrician at Oakland's Kaiser Hospital, has written extensively opposing mass screening.
To undertake this mass screening program is a multi-billion-dollar effort. And we have problems such as immunizations and poor care, teenage pregnancies, child abuse, violence that are not being funded. So it's, in my mind, a very low priority item. And for us to spend major funds on this is an unwise way to spend tax dollars.
At the University of California, San Francisco, Dr. Schoen told physicians that screenings for lead in poor, high-risk areas are a good idea. But mass screening makes little sense. It's a theme he has turned into a crusade.
Lead is a serious problem in very high amounts. There's no question about that. But lead poisoning in children is a disappearing disease. It reached its peak about 30 years ago, and lead levels of children have been going down markedly, so that now we're at an all-time low.
Don't let her move, okay?
Dr. Schoen charges that the danger level for lead in the blood of children has been steadily lowered by the CDC, thereby increasing the number of children counted as poisoned by lead. Dr. Schoen calls it creating an epidemic by edict. He says numerous studies, many showing a drop in IQ with exposure to lead, are contradictory and inconclusive.
You can find in the literature what you want to find. And I think that many of the studies that have been done have been faulty studies. I don't believe that at low to moderate levels that lead has an effect on neurobehavioral ability at all, and I don't think that the evidence is really conclusive at all. And I'm not alone in this. As I say, that the entire study that was done in England and all through Europe, and there were many studies, it's exactly the conclusion that they came to.
But Dr. Goldman's own studies in California contradict Dr. Schoen's analysis. She defends a link between lead exposure and IQ loss.
Some of the evidence is from studies of children, where children have been studied forward through time, and it's turned out that their past lead levels affected their IQ. What we're usually talking about from those studies is that for every increase of 10 micrograms per deciliter of blood lead, there's a lowering of IQ by something like maybe 3 to 5 IQ points. And that relationship seems to hold true even below the levels we now define as toxic levels.
While scientists still debate the extent of the lead threat, neighborhood groups and politicians have already made lead poisoning a target. 3 years ago, angry Oakland parents demanded immediate blood tests for their children and won a small victory when Children's Hospital agreed to provide those tests. Health activists ignore the scientific dispute over what constitutes dangerous lead levels. Lisa Pagan works for a San Francisco environmental group.
Parents aren't going to take the risk on their own children to wait for the studies that need to be still done, you know, to see if actually indeed low levels are as harmful as high levels. We want our environment cleaner, and that's what we're working towards. You know, everybody has the right to a clean environment. Everybody has the right to safe housing. Everybody has the right to have a lead-free place if they want it.
Pagan, along with a city health worker, regularly scour poor neighborhoods like this one in San Francisco, trying to tell families about the danger lurking in their walls.
When they brought the baby home, she was beautiful and perfect.
The Environmental Protection Agency and the National Safety Council are promoting the lead issue, too. They produced this TV spot featuring actress Felicia Rashad.
Eat it, drink it, even breathe it. 1 out of 6 preschoolers has high levels of lead in their blood.
Television announcements as well as outreach programs are expensive, yet even in tight budgetary times, Alameda County's lead program will spend $4.6 million next year, partly for lead abatement.
The good thing about this is that you can stand with virtually no dust whatsoever. You use it.
Abatement means removing lead from the house or grounds where it can poison children. Every 6 weeks, a nonprofit agency sponsors these classes for contractors and workers who want to get into the fledgling abatement business. Cleanup, either through mopping or painting or full abatement, is the most common treatment for lead poisoning.
It's not a medical issue. To me, it's a public health and political issue.
Pediatrician Dr. Patricia Chase directs the lead clinic at Children's Hospital, Oakland. She believes the most important thing is to prevent further exposure by improving housing conditions and reaching out to parents.
We can screen children, and we can find out that they may have mild elevations in lead. We can send public health out and the lead program out to do home evaluations. But then what's going to happen then? You know, like who's going to fix up the houses?
Government-sponsored loans and grants are available to property owners for such work. Like asbestos, lead must be handled carefully. The instructor at the abatement class is Wes Straub, an industrial hygienist from Massachusetts.
The number that's frequently tossed around is 60 million units nationwide that require abatement. We're talking billions and billions of dollars totally.
Once you pull the hood back.
But the question remains, how much of this is necessary? Alameda County has initiated a study to figure that out and to look for cheaper ways of removing lead.
Lift the poly up.
It's unclear if the medical evidence justifies starting whole new businesses and funding new agencies to combat the problem. Instructor Straub has no medical training, but he's convinced it does.
What we do believe is that there's been a loss of a certain level of intelligence. We don't know what you or I could have been in terms of where our intelligence could be. What the term is that's been described frequently is we've made a generation just a little bit stupider. And we talk about nationwide at this point in time losing a competitive edge against foreign markets.
Such assertions exasperate Dr. Schoen, who believes any IQ drops are more linked to poverty, child abuse, and poor nutrition than to lead. He thinks researchers are doing a disservice to the public by spreading the anti-lead message.
It becomes almost an obsession, I think, among some of the investigators in this field. And if you take that to the public in a field like lead, and especially when you say to parents you might be brain damaging your child, I mean, that's a very highly emotionally charged issue.
So far, the scientific debate has done little to dampen the enthusiasm of those seeking to eradicate lead from the environment. While both the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics acknowledge that it will be expensive and difficult to test all children for lead, that goal remains. And for now, the activists, medical and social, are being aided by the political popularity of their cause.
Again, the major story of this Monday was the aftermath of the Saturday U.S. bombing attack on Baghdad. President Clinton said the Iraqi intelligence capability had been seriously damaged. He ordered the attack in retaliation for an alleged Iraqi plot to assassinate former President Bush. On the NewsHour tonight, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Madeleine Albright, warned any retaliation from Iraq would bring another U.S.
So they would either do this or put a parking lot. So parking lot wouldn't have gotten me any money, so I figured let's do it, but it turned out to be more of a project than we had anticipated.
They turned the upper floors into an apartment building. Fewer rooms than when cattlemen selling to Swift Packing Company stayed here, but with balconies and shared deck.
This had tin, just layers of tin that went up. It was actually pretty dreary.
All done with private financing. Some bankers even expressed doubt.
We don't believe you guys can finish it. That's kind of what they're saying. But if you finish it, and it's up and running, and you can show us, 3 months of income versus whatever, we'll give you a percentage of your money back on it.
Graziano expects to get that. All but 2 apartments are rented. Along the street, the Java shop is open with customers. Mrs. Smith at the counter. Next door, the Kenton Street station. It opens this week or next. Owner Ralph Eaton was born in the neighborhood. He didn't think he'd want to come back here to open a pub, but he did.
When I see how the changes that have been made, I've changed my opinion of North Portland completely. I mean, it's beautiful.
Beautiful because people have been trying.
Look at that. He put awnings up. He's got his flowers. I don't know if it's pressure. Maybe he figured, if he doesn't do it, his neighbor's going to look down on him. But whatever it is, he did it.
What will Kenton become? Just ask Jess Smith.
We look at this to being like the next Hawthorne, Broadway, 23rd Avenue.
Ray Summers at Large with photographer Wayne Cosbaugh.
A lot of those old neighborhoods are really coming back. Kenton business leaders say they have worked very hard to keep that neighborhood alive.
And of course, to make changes, you have to have community support, and in Kenton, they have community support.
That's right. We've got election results tonight at 11, right?
It'll be an exciting 11. We hope you'll join us, and we'll have all the returns.
Good night.
This whole day of fishing is brought to you by Ultrathon Insect Repellent and its unique controlled release formula. At last, all day without a bite.
Budweiser presents the 70th Annual Molalla Buckaroo Rodeo, July 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Molalla, Oregon. See top professionals compete for thousands of dollars in prize money. If you like fun and excitement, this is it. The 70th Annual Molalla Buckaroo Rodeo, July 2nd through the 5th in Molalla. Tickets available at G.I. Joe's or the Buckaroo Grounds. Call 829-8388 for information and get ready for Championship Rodeo in Molalla.
Just an electric, no job is too big. Just an electric, no job is too small.
Need a clean, experienced electrician? Have you had your electrical panel serviced lately? Call the experienced electricians at Jessen Electric. Jessen Electric has trucks located throughout the greater Portland-Vancouver area. give us a call. We'll help.
Just an electric, no job is too small. Just an electric.
On Sunday, July 4th, 7 of America's fastest Greyhounds will challenge one top contender from Multnomah Greyhound Park, the Coors $50,000 Superstar Invitational.
Chili, fried coffee.
You better add on some Tums.
On the house.
Except these aren't Tums.
Same thing.
Got them all mixed up.
I told you, they're all the same.
Listen to me. Tums has calcium. Is this calcium? No. It uses aluminum and magnesium. So does this. This here, Original Rolaids, uses an aluminum salt. The only one of these that helps wipe out heartburn and gives you calcium you need is Tums.
Something my body needs anyway. I like that.
Insist on calcium-rich Tums.